Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Elizabeth Ellis. Following official recognition of the Cornish language by the UK government in 2002, Elizabeth Ellis was the first ever paid officer to work on promoting and developing the language, which included standardizing the spelling of written Cornish. She now works as a freelance Cornish translator and consultant, collaborating with musicians, theater companies, and filmmakers to create a wide variety of cultural assets using Cornish. I am so thrilled to welcome you to the podcast today, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me along. This is wonderful to be able to share my gorgeous language with people around the world.
Yes, absolutely. And this is, for my listeners and for you, I may have told you this before, but this is the debut of Cornish on Speaking Tongues. So I have so much to learn. I'm so excited. I'm so interested in finding out more about Cornish. So, to dive in, I like to start each episode with the same question, which is what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Okay. So, my first language is English, and my second language is what should be my mother tongue, which is Cornish. And that's the really fascinating thing about Cornish, that there are very, very few native speakers, mother tongue speakers. So I learned Cornish as a child. I then learned Spanish, French, and Latin at school, tiny bit of Russian at university. And then as an adult, I've learned a bit of Welsh just because of the links with Welsh and Cornish. But my main languages are English, first language, and Cornish, mother tongue, but learned as a second language.
So tell me about that. As you said, there are very few speakers. So what was your initial exposure to Cornish and how did you come about learning it?
Well, I was in a situation where my mum found out about evening classes and went to evening classes to learn Cornish, which is how a lot of people do come to learn Cornish. And she would come home, and I was just a kid at the time, and she would talk to myself and my brother and in Cornish, and we would pick up bits and pieces very organically. So it was, we weren't from birth learning Cornish, but from, single digits, I was learning bits and pieces of Cornish at home. So we'd speak at the meal table in Cornish. And then we'd go to events where there were other families that spoke Cornish, and I met other kids, and we'd hang out on the playground and, playing Cornish together, and then have little lessons and so on. Um, but I mean, quite frankly, I was a bit of a freak at the time because there were
No.
very, very few people who spoke Cornish, especially children, really not
Mm,
that many at all.
mhm.
You could kind of count us on two hands, maybe, all the kids across Cornwall who spoke any Cornish. We kind of we all knew each other.
Mhm.
So I taught bits and pieces to my friends and my classmates at school. I was, quite a cocky kid. I'd go into school and go, can I, to the teacher, can I teach my friends some bits of Cornish? And they'd go, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Um, so, yeah, looking back, I realized how actually our family was quite cutting edge,
Mm.
quite sort of pioneering, because we were some of the first sort of generations of families where parents were then teaching their children, and it was becoming quite an organic sort of thing that you just did at home. It was just what you did.
Mhm. Yeah. You know what I love about the story you just told is that sense of pride that you
Yeah.
had in the language and you felt that and the confidence to go to your peers, your classmates and want to teach them Cornish. Where does that come from?
Well, it's obviously a genetic thing because my daughter, who is 8 now, she moved schools a little while ago, and she one of the first things she did when she moved to her new school was she said, "I speak Cornish. Can I teach some?" And so she was taken around lots of different classes in the school to teach little bits of Cornish. So it's obviously sort of, I've passed that on. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a real sense of pride. Cornish people are very, very proud.
Yes.
Most Cornish people don't speak Cornish, but they're very proud of who they are. Cornwall, although viewed by most of the world as part of England, is
Mhm.
not part of England. We have a very strong Celtic identity along with Wales and Ireland and, Scotland, Isle of Man. We are distinctive. We have very distinctive culture, and the language is probably one of the most significant markers of that distinctiveness.
Yeah.
Um, and we're proud of that.
I love that. I really do love that because I feel like a lot of times when we're children, we don't always, especially when we get to those teen years, we're kind of like, okay, or we're so self-conscious about the things that make us different. So I'm saying that I love to hear your confidence, and I love how you had that from such a young age, and now you're the next generation too. So
Yeah.
this is really so cool and so exciting. Um, I'd love to hear about the language itself.
Mhm.
We know Cornish is a Celtic language, and there are, you know, relationships amongst other Celtic languages and Cornish. But as you said, Cornish is distinct and it's proud and it's Cornish. So how are we forming sentences and how are we communicating? Are there particular greetings for certain people in the community? And maybe if you want to talk a little bit about what sets it apart from maybe other
Okay.
Celtic languages. I'd love to know more about that.
Okay, so one of the things, firstly, to say what it is has massively in common with all the Celtic languages is it has a wonderful thing called mutations, which sound so scary, and they are where letters at the beginning of words change depending on various things that come before that word. And that is a very specific thing to all Celtic languages. And
Mhm.
anyone coming to learn a Celtic language, having not learnt one before, finds it terribly scary. But teachers will always say, just let it wash over you. My teacher, when I actually went and had some proper lessons rather than just learning from my mum, he just said, you know, it's the zen of mutation. Just sit there and let it be. Just become familiar with it. Don't try and learn it. Just let it wash over you and it will settle in. And it does. And the
Okay.
great thing is, once you've got the idea of mutations, you then can look at any other Celtic language and go, yep, I know why that's changed.
Okay. Okay.
um, so yes, it is one of the Celtic languages, and there are two groups of Celtic languages. There are the southern P Celtic languages and the northern Q Celtic. So the southern P Celtic ones are the Brythonic languages of Cornish, Breton, and Welsh. So basically, there was originally a kind of Celtic language spoken across the whole of the British Isles, and then bit by bit, successive waves of invaders pushed the Celtic peoples out to the edges, which is why all the Celtic nations are on the sort of western, northern, southern edges of Britain. And then some of the people from the kind of Cornish area of Britain, the southern area, went across the sea to Brittany. So the languages started to develop in different directions because they were physically isolated from each other. So we've got that northern lot which developed in one way, southern lot developed in another way. Words in Cornish and the P Celtic languages that begin with P in the Q Celtic languages would have a C or a K sound. So we've got Ciaran, the Irish saint, and in Cornwall we have Piran. So the Irish saint, you know, in Ireland was named that. Then he comes
Yeah.
across the sea on a millstone, gets to Cornwall, and he's known as Piran.
Huh.
And there are lots of other words where pen in Cornish, which is a headland, in the northern Celtic languages, I'm not great at them, but it's basically cairn, which is headland. So there's very strong connections, but it's developed in different directions.
Okay. Thank you for that example because that was going to be my follow-up question is what do you mean by the P and the C? But that's really so cool. That's so interesting. When you're in Cornwall, as
Mm.
you are now, do we see Cornish language around us?
Yes, we
Okay.
do now. We do
Okay.
now, which is wonderful. I mean, well, I suppose you always have in that place names are Cornish. And so even before the revival of the Cornish language as a spoken community language, it was still around everybody and they just sort of took it for granted. You know, there were weird names that were not like anything in England at all
Mhm.
and were unintelligible to an English speaker. And so they've always been there. But now in even my lifetime, you know, when I was a child, there was not much Cornish around. There might be a sign as you drove across the Tamar Bridge into Cornwall saying, Cerno agus diner, welcome to Cornwall. And that was about it. And
Okay.
I remember going, I was in a Cornish dance group and I used to go to all sorts of other Celtic nations. And I remember being in the Isle of Man and seeing a water van that said Ushja on the side, which is water in Manx. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could get to that stage? And you know what? I kind of take it for granted now, but we have. Cornwall Council, which is our kind of big, you know, authority, has taken on board the language really, really well. I don't know, around Ailgilchia, Cornwall recycles. And, you know, we just have so much around us. Businesses, individual private businesses are looking to the language to name their businesses. And so I know I'm driving around and I see new vans every day going like, oh, I didn't know that business had a Cornish name. How good is that? I've not seen that one before. So yeah, it is all around us. much more so and increasingly so, which is wonderful.
That's terrific. I don't like to compare generally. Um, and I don't like to compare because I don't want a comparison to be anything diminishing to anyone's language. But as you did mention, you took a trip to the Isle of Man, and you noticed something that was in Manx, and you were asking, well, where is this in Cornwall?
Mm.
I'm wondering, for someone who has not seen Cornwall before,
Mm.
and maybe they can say, okay, this is a part of this language family. Are there any defining figures of Cornish orthography or spoken Cornish that someone who's not a Cornish speaker would be able to say, maybe compared to a
Yes.
Manx or Breton or etc., that we'd say, oh, this is Cornish?
Yes. So the most obvious orthographical feature is the letter DH, which is the same as the Welsh equivalent DD. So it's a th sound, a hard
Oh,
TH sound.
okay.
So if I were to say hello to you in Cornish, it'd be dydd da with a DH at the end, DYDH, dydd da. And so I don't think there are any other Celtic languages that have that DH. It's
Hmm.
very similar to the Welsh, but it's distinctive to Cornish. We have a lot of GHs as well, which is a really nice sound. So like back of the throat. The closest thing I can link it to is like the Scots loch. So I mean, I suppose that yeah, it is a Celtic feature, but it features a lot in Cornish. So if you see a language written down with lots of DHs, lots of GHs, and probably quite a lot of Ys as well. Oh, and HW, wh, we've got lots of whs as well. Um,
How would
they're
we
quite
pronounce
distinctive.
that?
Wh,
Hua.
yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, quersin to laugh, quersin.
Mm,
It's a bit like when you're at school and you're taught which, where, when. Uh,
I see. Okay, I'm writing this down because this is cool and I want to remember it. And again, like I said, I don't want to necessarily, compare a language, but we're here. We're talking about it and we're trying to learn. I'd love to know a bit about some history of Cornish and maybe some historical connections. I know that you mentioned to me, well, I want you to tell the story because you told it so brilliantly. A connection between Cornish and the Book of Common Prayer.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not an obvious connection, but it was basically the death knell for the Cornish language in its state of being the national language of Cornwall. So we're looking at 1549. King Henry VIII has died, leaving his boy son, Edward VI, on the throne. He's ever so young, and so he's got lots of advisors around him who are, jostling for power and trying to achieve certain agendas of their own, one of which is to secure England as a Protestant nation. So all the remnants of Catholicism are obliterated, including the Latin Mass. And in its place, the Book of Common Prayer is introduced, which, to a lot of people is viewed as a really good thing because it's the first time that a church service is in the vernacular.
Mm.
The problem is for Cornwall, it's not the vernacular of Cornwall because in 1549, we didn't speak English in most of Cornwall. It was still a very much Cornish speaking nation.
Mm.
And so it's introduced in quite a heavy handed sort of way. There are people sent from London to ensure that it is being used and that the Latin Mass is no longer being said. And so the people of Cornwall got a bit cross with this, and they wrote to the king and said, "We, the Cornish men, whereof certain of us understand no English, utterly refuse this new English." And that's about as clear as you can get. But the crown didn't pay much attention to that. They continued trying to encourage people to use it in a fairly heavy-handed way. So the Cornish started to march, as they have been known to do, on London. They didn't quite get as far as London like they did in 1497. So 1549, they only got as far as Exeter and a bit further. And there was a big battle outside Exeter at Clyst St Mary. In it, about 1,000 Cornish men were killed, 900-ish taken prisoner and executed. A further, goodness knows, quite a few thousand escaped, but were captured and then killed escaping. And then Sir Anthony Kingston, one of the king's men, came into Cornwall and swept through the nation, executing another 1,000 or so people who had been shown to support the refusal of the Book of Common Prayer. And bizarrely, there's one story which is really bizarre of the mayor of Bodmin welcomed Sir Anthony Kingston into Bodmin, and he said, "I'd like you to prepare a big feast for me." So he prepared a big feast, and "I'd like you to prepare your gallows, please." And so he got the gallows ready. They had a great feast, and then at the end of the meal he said, "And I'm going to hang you because you, the mayor, were in favour of not having this Book of Common Prayer." So I mean, it was a very, very bloody time. So getting towards the point of that is that in that time, 5,000, it's estimated 5,000 Cornish men died. That's 11% of the population of Cornwall, which is 22% of the male population. And of that, they were mostly from the Cornish speaking areas. So you can imagine it sends an incredibly strong message to the whole of Cornwall. This is it. You have to start speaking English. This is the time. And so a former Grand Bard of the Cornish Gorsedd, Pole Hodge, says, the heart of the Cornish speaking people had been ripped out by the death of such a huge number of their people. And it really was the beginning of the end. So from then on, Cornish was pushed further and further west by English. It retreated right to the very western parts of Penwith and the Lizard Peninsula, in particular Penwith. And that was the last sort of stronghold of the language as a community language. So people in West Cornwall, there were a few famous people. Dolly Pentreath is often quoted as being the last person who could speak Cornish. The reality is she was probably the last person who refused to speak English. So she was quite bloody-minded. She was a fishwife from Newlyn, and she would just swear at people in Cornish if they tried to get her to speak English. She famously called people "Ti chronic haggardu, you ugly black toad." In a bit of cows or so, I don't want to speak English. Then there's another chap from that same area in West Cornwall called William Bedinner, who incidentally my husband is descended from, which is funny.
Wow.
So William Bedinner wrote a letter to try and prove that there was a language that was Cornish. And so he was quite rusty. He'd learnt it from people on the boats, the fishing boats, older men. And he was trying to write a bilingual letter saying, these are the things that I know. And he wrote it English and Cornish. But because it was a dying language at that stage, he was getting things wrong. So rather than saying piscader for fisherman, he said Dain and Puskis, man of the fish, which, it was getting a bit corrupted. So that was about 1776. And by 1800, it had basically died out as a community spoken language.
Yeah.
People might have known odd words, and it continued in Cornish dialect in Cornwall, which is basically English, but with bits of remnants of the language thrown in. And then the next thing that happened was the 19th century, some academics started to take an interest in the language, and they started to discover some of the other medieval texts and to write translations of it and publish them. But then the big turning point was 1904, when Henry Jenner, who was working at the British Library at the time, published his Handbook of the Cornish Language. So that was the first proper revival where he was giving other people the tools to be able to start to learn the language. And so the revival took place from then all the way through the 20th century. And then culminating in 2002, when Cornish was finally recognised by the UK government under the Council of Europe's Charter for Regional or Minority Languages. And that was a massive, massive point where, we weren't just a bunch of freaks like I was at school, who were trying to do something a bit weird. We were official. It was an official language, recognised language. And we got a bit of funding, which caused there to be an office for the first time. And there were 2 paid employees. There was my boss. So I was actually the second paid employee, but I was the second ever paid person to work on the revival of the language. Until then, it had all been done as a voluntary thing and for the love of it. And so, we then got official recognition. We prioritized standardizing the spelling of the language, because until that point, people had been reviving it and taking different periods of history as the starting point. So some people went, well, we need to take it up from where it died out in that kind of 1700s. But then, as I was saying, it was quite a weakened form. There was a lot of English, and a lot of things had been forgotten or just weren't quite as strong as they had been in the medieval period, when it was the, pre the Prayer Book Rebellion, when there were plays being written by monks at Glasney College near Penryn, religious plays, but that were a real kind of community thing. They brought everyone together. They told people how to live their lives in a very kind of irreverent way. There's lots of fart jokes and things like that in them. You know, these are monks writing really
Yeah,
quite, you
yeah.
know, they were threatened with
As they do.
excommunication. They're brilliant. They're absolutely superb plays, but they're a really good corpus for the
Yeah.
revival. So most people have revived the language based on medieval Cornish,
Okay.
which some people might think is a bit weird, but it's a stronger, more full form of the language. And so, yeah, if English were to be dying out, would we take it from when it was, you know, turning into something barely recognizable, or would we go back to, I don't know, when it's now and it's a big, strong
Mhm.
language?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine reviving English off of like YouTube? Like if all we had was YouTube
Yes.
to revive English, it
Yeah.
would be light years away from how we experience it now and, you know, how we've
Yeah.
experienced it over the past
Yeah.
century.
But I
Um,
mean, you just saying that makes you realize quite what a big job it was. These people
yeah,
who did it, you know, like Henry Jenner, that's a massive job reviving
yeah.
a language to get to this stage in just over 100 years is
Yeah,
amazing.
that's what I was gonna say. I wrote down those dates and thank you for that comprehensive overview, which is very thorough. I like I'm amazed because it takes me too long to tell a story all the time and you just like knocked it out. Quick history. But I was writing down the dates. So there's math is not my strong suit, but we've got about 300 years or so between 1549 1904,
Hmm.
more than that, 300-ish years.
Hmm.
And then just from 1904 to 2002, a span of a century,
Mm.
we're back. We're in full
Yeah.
effect and we've got status. So my question is, you're learning the language as a kid, an excited kid to go and your mom was also learning the language as well. And you had this language as part of your family within that century of a period.
Mm.
Like what was and maybe you spoke about this before, but I'm just thinking about it in the context of time now that I can see the timeline ahead of me.
Yeah.
um how was the language from 1904? He discovered this piece and now he's interested in the revitalization process, and I imagine it's going slow, but even looking at it being a century, maybe it was going quicker than I would imagine that it was. But what do you know about the way that it moved from this one person's research and what they found into growing into part of the community? Were people receptive of it? Were there little pieces like pamphlets or little books and notes being passed and, you know, as technology would allow in the early 1900s, like how was that growing over the last century?
So, yeah, that's a really good question. In around that time, 1904, there was a really big Celtic revival going on in lots of places, you know, Wales as well as Cornwall, where
Mhm.
people were really starting to look back to their Celtic heritage. And it's around this time that the Cornish Gorsedd, the celebration of Cornish culture, was introduced. Reintroduced, people might say. I mean, a Gorsedd is a gathering of bards. So originally that would have literally been people who sang and told stories, but now it's more bards are people who do wonderful things to promote Cornwall, to revive things, to you know sustain our beautiful differences. So that all began around the same sort of time as Henry Jenner was writing his Handbook of the Cornish Language. So he was the sort of the big main person, but very soon after him, lots of other people who were involved in that Celtic revival also started to do stuff. So we've got people like um, Robert Morton Nance, who created probably the first recognized form of Cornish in revival, which is unified Cornish.
Mhm.
And he produced dictionaries and textbooks and all sorts of stuff. And then beyond that, we then have people starting to revive late Cornish, which is the Cornish that was, you know, just before it died out. And so we've got people like Richard Gendall, and he's doing research into his sort of era of Cornish and producing materials for people to learn. And so people started to follow these people.
Okay.
And then that grew and grew. And because of organizations like the Gorsedd and things like the Federation of Old Cornwall Societies, which again promote traditions and heritage and culture of Cornwall, it spreads through to the community, not so much as a kind of ground level, but it's more of it's the people who have an interest in these things.
I see. Okay.
And then in more recent years, it's spread more and it's spread more, and it's now being taught in schools a little bit, which it wasn't when I was at school.
Hmm.
So it's mushrooming. It's going from a very small number of people
Hmm.
to a slightly bigger group of really fanatical people who have a passion. We've gone from it being a handful of quirky people to being much more normalized, and
Hmm.
that is the thing. Normalization is just
Yeah.
such a wonderful thing. Just for example, there's a St. Piran's Day parade in Truro. There's St. Piran's Day. He's the patron saint of Cornwall. St. Piran's Day parades all over Cornwall. And I went to the one in Truro this year on the 5th of March. And just to hear all the school children that were involved in the parade shouting, Colonel Bisvicken, Cornwall forever. And I thought, wow, these are kids that are not from families of Cornish speakers. These are kids that have just come along to take part in this celebration. And that might be the only bit of Cornish they know. But my goodness, they were proud of it. And they used it again and again. And they kept, a little pocket of kids would shout it and then another little pocket of kids. Wow. I mean, it's normalized. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
not everyone speaks it, but people know about it now. They
Right.
are proud of it, even if they don't speak it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, huge transformation in 100 years.
Yeah, that's exciting. And you really touched upon what I was trying to get at too, because, as you said, I'm going to quote you because I don't agree with this word, but you said freak when you were younger. And I don't agree with that. But I'm thinking, if this was a person who was in school 40 years before you were,
Mm.
what kind of exposure would that person have had? And I don't expect you to have an answer for that, but it's like, as you came along at your point in time, and then the people who came a generation or two before you at their point in time,
Mm.
and now you're seeing the kids now down the road and their point in time, that must be like, how, well, we know Cornish people are proud, but how does it make you feel to see that?
Oh, it's amazing because it means that all the work that all these people have done has worked and it can only continue to flourish. We have a wonderful recognition under UNESCO of not just being critically endangered, but under the process of revitalization, and
Mm,
that is really a very, very positive place to be, because there is such a sort of downward trend in a lot of cultural things, languages being spoken, languages being lost.
yeah,
And for Cornwall to be bucking that trend and going in the opposite direction is absolutely wonderful. And
yeah,
to see it all around where it wasn't all around when I was a kid, and to hear it spoken by kids who would not have spoken it, as you say, when I was at school, certainly not 40 years before that, is just, yeah, it makes me feel very happy that that's the case.
That's really exciting. That's so thrilling. That's really so thrilling. Talk to me about your path to translation. Because being a speaker and being a translator, those are two different lanes. Or,
Mhm.
they overlap, but they don't necessarily overlap. But
Yeah.
what was your path to Cornish translation, and what were some of the things that, or moments that even went into your decision to become a translator?
Okay, so yeah, we spoke it at home, and then, well, I went away to university and realized quite how unique and special this was, that I had a native British language that I spoke that was really special. And I was with loads of people who, yeah, they were from all over the world, but the other British people might have spoken Welsh or whatever, but I spoke Cornish. And wow, I realized then quite how special it was. I didn't realize until then quite how amazing it was. So when I came back from my 3 years away, I sat down and I did a year's intensive kind of learning with a teacher, Paul Hodge, wonderful, wonderful man, and took the highest level exam you can at the end of that year, because I wasn't going from scratch. I was going from a weird place of being able to speak Cornish, but not necessarily understanding why I was saying things and how I was saying these things. And so, yeah, it was a quite intensive year, but I passed with distinction. Was made a bard of the Cornish language, of the Cornish Gorsedd, for my language skills. And then it was not that long after that that we got recognition. from the Council of Europe. And so we got the money, and then I was in the right place at the right time to be able to apply for the second of these two jobs, and I got it. So for about 7 years, I worked in an office with Cornwall Council, in the Cornish Language Partnership, and was involved in all these amazing stages of revitalization, like the standardization, getting specialists who'd gone through similar experiences with other languages to come together to Cornwall to advise us and to help us. And that was amazing. I mean, it was, yeah, that I think has been a really huge step in enabling the language to move forward, because before that time, there was a lot of disagreement of, oh, that's the wrong form of Cornish. That's, you can't do that. That's wrong. Having a standardized form means that schools can teach it, signs can be put up, and nobody's going to go, that's wrong, because it's official.
Yeah.
So that was great. But then I kind of took a bit of time out to, become a mum. And during that time, I continued doing little bits of translation work. Just, I'd never had any formal training in translation. I'd just used it in my job in the Cornish Language Office, and then started doing translation work, little bits and pieces, mainly for the council. And then it got to a couple of years ago when I was being given a couple of really big, substantial, quite fun projects. Like one, I was working with a load of libraries in Cornwall to produce a resource with a musician for rhyme time sort of things, nursery rhymes and so on, that toddlers and so on could access. So I was involved in that, and I was the translator on that, and it was great fun. And then there was also a residency up in North Cornwall at St Endelian, where I was the language expert, and I was I wasn't staying, but I was hanging out with three musicians who didn't have any Cornish, and they wanted to use Cornish in their creative practice. And that was the biggest moment, because I met three incredible people who all were so passionate about wanting to use Cornish. And I thought, okay, yeah, I've been a stay-at-home mum with a little bit of translation on the side. This is what I want to do. I don't want to go and get a job in an office somewhere doing whatever that I don't really care that much about. I can do this. It's quite niche. And so I've specifically gone down the route of not just translation, but creative translation. And it's been a really weird path, because I remember working in the language office, and when a song translation would come in, I'd go, whoa, I'm not doing that. That's far too complicated. And I had certain people that I knew I could send it to who would be really good at it. But it's actually become my niche thing, my thing that I love doing, because it's a really creative art form in itself, that you're translating either song lyrics or creating song lyrics or translating verse. So I've translated Tennyson's poem, The Lady of Shalott, into Cornish, as you do, because one of the musicians on this residency at St Endelian went, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'd quite like to do a song cycle based on The Lady of Shalott. Do you fancy translating it? I went, yeah, okay, we'll have a go. And it was fascinating, because I started doing bits of it there and then with him. And, I was okay. And then continued working on the whole of the rest of the poem over about a year. And my skills refined themselves. That project turned me into what I am now. And I had to go back and rewrite some of the first verses I did, because I became better at managing to stick to the meter, stick to the rhyme pattern. And yeah.
So
such fun.
I love how you make it so much fun. You have so much joy, and I feel this joy, and I'm joyful with you because this is so exciting. Take me back to what you said about you would get a song translation when you were working in the office. And you would pass on it. You didn't want to approach it. Why? And what were some of the feelings behind making that decision?
Just, I'd say translating songs or verse is, I'd say it's the most difficult type of translation you can do. So, I've done forwards for council documents and so on, and you have to be very formal, but it's quite straightforward. I mean, translation is never entirely literal, because there are idioms and so on. And so you're translating it into the idioms of the new language. But with translating something like a song, there is so much to go through. You don't just sit down and do a translation. It's a massive long process. And I recently taught a seminar on, my processes of doing a creative translation, because it's not something that comes naturally. It's something that you kind of have to go, okay, this is going to take a long time. It's going
Mhm.
to involve a lot of staring at the computer screen, just waiting for inspiration,
Mhm.
trying to think of synonyms that have the right number of syllables, or, you know, yeah, it's a process. I do a rough translation of something now and then just play with it. And it's like playing. It's such fun. And it can take ages. And, I'm writing this stuff at the moment for my latest song cycle that I'm working with the same composer as the Lady of Shalott song
Mhm.
cycle on. And sometimes I sit and I just go, I can't do this. I'm not in the right headspace. It's like composing. He says sometimes he's not in the right headspace. There's just no point. Just move, go away, have a cup of tea, come back to it another time. Other times you sit there and the inspiration comes and all the words flow and you're like, yeah, this is great.
That's interesting. I'm interested in translation myself. So it's always I always like to ask a translator about their process and kind of just what it looks like and what's going on in their head, because it is daunting to see something and think like, I'm not ready for this, or maybe someone would be better at this than me. And it ultimately all comes through you. So if you're not in the right place in your life, or maybe in the right headspace, maybe the piece that you're translating won't come out right either.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
yeah.
You've got to be in the right state to do it. And yeah, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But the resulting product, the thing you create at the end of it is something to be so proud of.
Mhm,
I mean, I'm incredibly proud of my translation of The Lady of Shalott, and I love working with musicians and enabling them to, I've got these two other musicians, two ladies that I was working with on that residency, and we have more of a sort of rather than translating something that already exists with them, they come to me with an idea and say, this is roughly what I want to do, and then we'll sit down together and we'll play with the ideas and create something together. So it's kind of translation, kind of creating, but
mhm.
with the songwriter's direction in all of it.
Yeah.
And to then hear these pieces of beautiful professional music coming out of it. And
Mhm,
that's something that's really special as well, and that's happened in my lifetime. When I was a child, music or film, theatre, anything like that in Cornish was all very kind of on an amateur level. And now we've got quite a sea change in that we've got professional musicians, professional theatre companies and filmmakers who are taking an interest in wanting to use Cornish in their art. And so everything's taking a step up.
yeah.
You're not just got people doing it for the love of it and maybe not being the best in the world, but you've got people who are really, really good at what they do. And then they're wanting to learn Cornish and to use Cornish in their work, which is just, it's great. We're getting some really top quality resources.
Yeah, that's terrific. I have a question, and I'm trying to figure out how I can ask this question without running around in circles. Um, when you're working with new art, new works, um, plays, songs, etc., and then you're working with something like Tennyson, something that has, you don't have direct contact with the author, obviously, or the creator, and you're working with something also that has been translated in other languages and other works, and has been so analyzed and so scrutinized, for better or for worse, over the years.
Mm.
What is the difference in that process and the way that you approach both of those sort of uh, things?
Well, do you know what? I would say I probably don't have that much of a difference in the
Okay.
process, in that I will either be looking at the tone and the style of a piece that's already been created, like the Tennyson poem,
Mhm.
or I'll be listening to the musician, the modern musician who's saying, I want to write a song about the sea monster Morgawr. And this is kind of, I want to base it on all the sightings of this creature. And you get a feel for what the writer's trying to achieve, and you're then trying to replicate that by having the same sort of feel to it, the same mood. And then it's a case of actually just playing with it. And so I don't think there's that much difference, I would say, between the two things. And likewise, whether you're translating Tennyson or a Julia Donaldson children's story, again, you're playing with the language. You're going, okay, this is what this person is saying, but it's not actually going to work with that meter or rhyme if I just do it straight translation. So let's think of another way of turning the sentence upside down, or finding synonyms, or finding alternative ways to say things. And sometimes it can be, it's this sort of creative translation is rather fun because it is very free. And when I was teaching this course for various Cornish speakers and writers who wanted to learn about translating, creative works in Cornish, one of the ladies there was a poet, a professional poet who writes in English usually, but also speaks Cornish. And she said she was very excited by what I taught her, because she said it freed her up to feel liberated, that she could actually translate her own work in a she didn't have to be quite strict with, it's got to be exactly the same. In order to do a good translation, you actually have to be quite free with it, and willing to take some big leaps of, this is slightly different from what the original is meant to be, but it gives the same impression and creates the same effect.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you too. Like, what can we express with Cornish that we can't express with English?
We can bring all sorts of qualities to a work with Cornish that you might not get in the originals. So, for example, Cornish, a lot of people say it sounds quite otherworldly, quite mysterious. And so that is an element that is wonderful to bring to things like, going back to Tennyson, the story of the Lady of Shalott is quite fairy tale-like. And so to have the story told in Cornish, it sort of lifts it up a notch in terms of its it's drama and its otherworldliness. And it's no surprise that Tolkien chose to base his, Elvish language on Celtic languages, because it does have that otherworldly magical quality to it. And also producing, art or pieces like this in Cornish has a really interesting dynamic with the audience, because most of the audience probably won't speak Cornish and so won't understand every word of what you're saying. So you need other methods to help them to understand. And that can be, music is great, because especially with classical music, you can tell a story through the drama of the music. There are a few moments in The Lady of Shalott when the singer she comes out of being a classical singer into she's totally singing as the lady. She's distressed, and wow, you don't need to understand the words to get that. Whoo, she's the curse has come upon her. Oh my goodness. And likewise with animations that I'm doing, dubbing animations, it's really great to have something that's already familiar to an English speaking audience, because then you can do a translation of it, dub it with Cornish speaking actors, and people don't have to understand every word, but they can get the gist because they're familiar with the story and the images.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of like going to the opera, where you don't need to speak German to understand,
Yes.
or Italian or whatever. So that
exactly.
is,
That's exactly how it is. Yes.
Yeah. So the artists that you're working with, like the musicians, let's say, for example, let's talk about music for a little bit. You said a lot of the audience is not familiar with Cornish. So my question is, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but just to ask, what are their motivations for having something translated into Cornish, or something, be able to perform their music in Cornish? What is some of the motivations that you've experienced with musicians for wanting this expression?
Well, they're various, actually. Two of the musicians that I work with most frequently are Cornish. The two ladies are Cornish, and so they have that sense of pride and place and identity. And having never learned Cornish themselves up till the point that they met me at this residency, they were keen to use the fact that the language exists and to use it in their art. So since then, they're now learning Cornish as well, and that's all going on along beautifully. The other one, this composer that I'm working with, the classical composer, is from up in near the sort of northwest of England, and has quite a strong kind of, not quite Scouse accent, but, near Liverpool type accent. But he has been living in Cornwall for some time. He's been representing Cornwall in, touring around Europe.
Hmm.
And he's often been, talking to people in all sorts of European cities about Cornwall. He's created music about different places in Cornwall. And so he's become a kind of ambassador for the nation itself. And then he feels like he has a responsibility through his skills to create beautiful cultural assets with the language that exists. And I mean, wow, full marks to him. He's amazing. He's not a Cornishman, but that's the thing about being Cornish. You don't have to be born and bred here to be totally, you can be a proud Cornish person without having been born and bred here. And he is a perfect case in point. So
Yeah.
Matthew Thomason, absolute wonderful bloke, great composer, and a genuine ambassador for Cornwall and the Cornish language, which
Okay.
is stunning.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about, that exact situation. Like if it's someone who maybe has experience with Cornish language, but maybe doesn't feel like they can evoke what they need to invoke with the language, or like in the composer's case, he's an ambassador. He's Cornish now.
Yeah. Oh,
Cornwall
absolutely.
has claimed him.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, he feels it. And yeah, he belongs here.
Mhm.
And he's doing an amazing job. I said to all three of the musicians at the end of the residency, you are now all officially ambassadors for the Cornish language. And my goodness, they've taken that so to heart. One of the musicians, Anna Anise, has just recorded her first album well, almost entirely in Cornish. And
Wow.
she's now touring it around the UK. So, she's not just taking it to the local people who might understand it, or at least will go, yeah, it's Cornish, so I'm interested because I live in Cornwall.
Mhm.
She's been touring it around all over,
That's
which is
beautiful.
like genuine ambassador stuff. Good
What
stuff.
what type of music does she play?
So she's a kind of folk artist. She's a singer-songwriter, plays the guitar, and she's a great storyteller. So she is the one who comes up with ideas based on myths and folklore, Cornish folklore.
Hmm.
One of the first pieces we created together was about the sort of idea of, where do the migrating birds that we now know migrate, from Africa? Where do they go in the winter? And there was a kind of folklore superstition that they go underground in the winter, they hang out in all the mines, and then they come back in the summer when it's warm. And so she wrote a song with my help about the cuckoo and the swallow and how they disappear underground into the mines. Um, and she's great. I I liken her to Sting quite a lot, because I've always thought Sting is like a really great storyteller, and she's the
Hmm.
kind of Cornish Sting.
Yeah. That's a good comparison, because he can weave a tale, Sting.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that. When she listens to this conversation, she'll be happy to hear that comparison. Um, I love folk tales. What other folk tales do we have in Cornwall?
Gosh, we've got so many. I mean, being a coastal nation, we have lots of sea, so we have lots of sea-based ones. We have the Mermaid of Zena, who heard a lovely young man singing in the church at Zena and came up the the stream to listen to him, and then sang with him, and then lured him away, and he disappeared. Nobody could find him, but before he left, he carved a mermaid on one of the pew ends in Zena Church, and
Mm.
it's still there. And then Morgoa, the kind of, it's like a sort of Loch Ness monster, but for Cornwall, and it's in the sea rather than in a loch. Um, Lots of otherworldly things. So piskies and spriggans and little, creatures. And Cornwall is famous for its tin mines. And
Okay.
people who worked in the tin mines were very superstitious. They would take their pasty, their meal, which was like a lunch in a packed lunchbox, but you eat the packed lunchbox. You just hold on to the crimp around the edge, and then when you don't have to wash your hands, you just get hold of the crimp, and then you throw the crimp away for the knockers, the spirits of the mine, so that they look after the mine and don't let it fall down on your head and kill you.
Mhm.
So things like that, lots and lots of folk tales. A very superstitious sort of place.
Okay. Okay. I was gonna ask you about this later, but I was embarrassed. But you mentioned it, and now I want to ask you before I forget. Cornish pasty. So I did not make the assumption that they were from Cornwall, even though it has in the name. And I think it's okay because we have names of all kinds of things that aren't necessarily from the place that
Mhm.
bears the name. But this is a Cornish food.
Absolutely, yes. So
Okay.
miners' wives would have made their husband's lunch in a pastry case, and you might have had a sort of first course at one end, the meat and vegetables at one end, and then you might have had some apple or a sweet thing at the other end, and then you'd wrap it up in a napkin or something and take it down the mine with you, and you've just got everything there. You've got your lunch totally ready to go, and you've also got that little token to give away to the knockers,
Knockers.
the spirits of the mine, to stop them from causing a mining disaster.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Because I heard them. I may have even had one in my day, but I I didn't make the assumption. I was like, should I
Yeah.
ask her or will she think
Yep,
I'm so stupid?
very definitely from Cornwall. And yeah, we're very proud of our pasties. We have, pasty making competitions and things. Oh yes. And
Yum.
and the answer to the question of who makes the best pasties in Cornwall is your mum, obviously.
I usually ask that question when food comes up, like, what's the food in where you are that people compete over and people think that their mother, their aunt, their dad, whoever makes the best one, but it's the passy, it's the
Oh
Cornish.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Do we have shops or is this mostly a food that's made at home?
Yeah, no, there's lots of companies that make pasties, and they've really taken off around the whole of the UK. So, first of all, it would be London stations. You'd have lots of pasty shops, but now I think you can pretty much find pasty shops all over the UK. And yeah, I know there are places places that the Cornish diaspora, so that the miners, when the mines were starting to close in Cornwall, they went across around the world to places like Mexico and California. There are pasty making people there who have their origins in Cornwall. So
Okay.
yeah,
Oh.
Grass Valley apparently. Anna and Niece, the music one of the musicians I work with, was out there recently because she's been doing some work with people in Grass Valley and celebrating their St. Piran's Day celebrations. And she said their pasties were very good.
Okay. We got an endorsement from someone in Cornwall. So I'm sure they're so excited about that. What do you look forward to in the future with not only the work that you do, but with the Cornish language and its expression in the arts in general?
I think just more of the same, and more people getting that inspiration to take it further, to learn it, to then be able to speak it, so that it's more possible to go down the road and meet someone and have a conversation in Cornish,
Mhm.
because that, I think, is the thing that we're missing at the moment.
Okay.
It's still pockets of people, and you have to make quite an effort to find other Cornish speakers to then have a conversation. You don't, it's not like in Wales, you go into a shop and they're speaking Welsh. It's not like that in Cornwall, really.
Okay.
So that would be the thing that would be really nice to achieve, to have a bigger mass of people who can hold a conversation in Cornish,
Hmm.
and that you can actually use it in everyday life. Because the other thing when you're learning Cornish is there aren't the opportunities to use it, to practice it. And so, if you're learning French, you go to France and you immerse yourself in the language. With Cornish, it's really hard. You have to make a lot of effort. You go to special evenings where Cornish speakers gather, called
Yeah.
Yes and Werin, and you get together and you have a drink and relax with the alcohol and talk.
Hmm.
But to be able to just actually live more in Cornish
Mm.
would be lovely.
Yeah. Artistically, is there anything that maybe is on your wish list to translate into Cornish?
Oh gosh. Now you're talking. I don't know. I mean, I already feel like I am such a blessed person, and I've been able to get to do stuff that is so right up my street. Because I mean, I've always loved pre-Raphaelite art and Arthurian stuff, and meeting some random person who goes, "Do you want to translate Tennyson?" Yes, and then working with him again on the greatest love story of in Cornwall of Tristan and Isolde is just wow. I mean, that sounds like I haven't got much ambition, but I feel like I'm already, doing the kind of the dream jobs, doing the dream translations. I don't know. I mean, I suppose I wouldn't mind. What would be quite fun to get the Duke of Cornwall to start using Cornish a bit more. So the
Okay.
Duke of Cornwall, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. This is not formed at all. This is just cogs going. The Duke of Cornwall speaks bits of Welsh because he's also the Prince of Wales. How cool would it be if I could become the Duke of Cornwall's personal translator, Cornish?
Wait, just so we're clear, the Duke of Cornwall now is that
Prince
Prince
William.
William? Oh my
Yes,
God.
that would be cool, wouldn't it?
That would be so cool.
I mean, I've done one little thing to do with royalty so far, and that was when King Charles acceded the throne. I translated the accession proclamation, the official proclamation, so that it could be pronounced from the steps of Truro Cathedral and then, disseminated from there to the people. So, in a very traditional way, although the news was spreading by, media,
Hmm.
the traditional way of letting the people know that there's a new king is there'd be a proclamation and it would spread from the city, the county town, city, and then spread out. So I got to do that, which was quite fun.
It's just accolade after accolade, Elizabeth. You are like firing on all cylinders. I love that. So you have a piece of Cornish history. Well, your husband has a piece of Cornish history being descended from a
Yes.
prominent person. And you've got Cornish history. And now you've got royal history connections too. This is amazing. Okay, so to the Duke of Cornwall, we have to learn Cornish. I think we could make this happen. You already have the royal connection. So, how can we build on that to get you on his radar? Um, I think that would be so exciting. I really think that would be so exciting.
I've got a plan. Okay. I'm going to,
Okay.
we'll be, hopefully doing performances of some of these song cycles
Hmm.
up in London at some point. So try and, get him along so you won't have to travel so far to hear something in the language of the place that he is the Duke of, and then go in for the kill and go, "Hello, my name is Elizabeth. Would you like me to be your official Cornish language translator? What do you think?" Do you
Exactly.
think that would clinch it?
I think that would. I think if there's anyone perfect for this opportunity, it's you. And I hope that, when the time is right, that it will happen. And I think it can. Like anything is possible. Anything is
Absolutely.
possible.
The thing begins with a thought, doesn't it?
It does. That and a positive and joyful attitude, which you definitely have. Absolutely. Um, Is there, and for the Duke of Cornwall who is listening to this, just to get him on the hook here, is there a Cornish word or phrase or expression that you feel captures something special about the Cornish culture that doesn't translate easily into English?
Yes. So my favorite example of this would be the word glass with a lovely long
Glass.
glass. Glass is a color and it means blue, green, and grey. And it's
Mm,
effectively sea color.
okay.
So any color that the sea can be is covered by glass. So anything that's blue, anything that's a natural green. So there's another word in Cornish for artificial green things. That's gwerth, that's glass. If it's, a tree or grass, it's glass. If it's grey, it's glass. And it just, we're a sea nation. We are surrounded on three sides by the sea. And glass is just a beautiful word. And it just encapsulates how we are, everything about us is to do with the sea and
Yeah.
just all connected.
Oh, I love that. I love that word. On the theme of colors, just because I'm curious, so you said this is blue, this is green, this is gray.
Yeah.
Are there any other words in Cornish that encompass more than one color?
Um, Not particularly, but there
Okay.
are weird combinations of colors that are put together to express a color that we have a single word for in English. So
Okay.
we don't have a word for orange on its own. It's ruvvelin. Ruth is red, melon is yellow. So ruvvelin is red yellow.
Okay.
Um, and we've got gwynruth, which is white red for pink. So these words didn't, don't exist in isolation. They have to be a kind of, it's a painter's palette,
Mhm.
which is quite interesting because Cornwall has quite a history of artists, and I'd never really thought of that before. We also have a rather lovely thing that a lot of fruits and vegetables their names are based around the word apple. And that's quite interesting because Cornwall is quite a good apple growing area. We're quite famous for our
Oh,
ciders. There's a very famous apple from Truro called the Rattler, and that's been turned into a super cider. Very nice, called
okay.
Rattler. And so, yeah, we have, I mean, some of these are in other languages as well, but I think we have more than most other languages. So we've got avel fruit. Avel dor is a ground apple, potato. We've got avel gwlanek, which is a woolly apple. And that, can you guess what that is?
Is it a
Woolly
coconut?
apple. No, it's a peach, kind of like
Oh,
fuzzy outside.
duh.
Close.
Yeah.
Great idea, though. And now you'll never get this one. Avel carenza, which means a love apple. Guess what that is?
It's a pear.
No, it's a
Oh,
tomato.
oh man, I'm terrible at this.
I'm sorry, I put you on the spot
No,
massively
no,
there. I
no.
just want to be more
Oh,
interactive.
I love brain teasers. No, this is fun. Okay. Let's wait. Can we do this over again? We've got
Yes, of course.
apple is
Avel.
apple,
Yeah.
and then potato is uh
Avel door.
avildor.
So we have the adjective coming after the noun. So apple ground,
Okay. And then
avel door.
avil peach is avil
Gwlanek, a woolly apple.
guanic, woolly apple, and then apple uh
Avel carenza.
avil carenza?
Carenza is love.
Carenza is a
Mm,
tomato.
yes.
Okay. Ooh.
Isn't that a beautiful word? I love
Yeah.
apple
That's
carenza. It's such
fun.
a lovely word. I love apple.
That's fun. And I can't believe I didn't get any of those. Oh my goodness. Tell me about Cornwall itself and what we are celebrating. I know you mentioned the patron saint of Cornwall and the parades and the celebrations that happen around this Patron's Day, I'm assuming. You said it's in March?
March. Yes.
March.
5th of March.
5th of
Yes.
March, 5th of March. Patron saint is when we're celebrating. What else are we celebrating in Cornwall?
So we've got lots of music. It's a very musical place. We've got male voice choirs, brass bands, traditional bagpipes, lots of folk music and folk songs. And whenever you get Cornish people together, they tend to sing, especially Cornish
Mm-hmm.
speakers. Get Cornish speakers together, they always sing.
Hmm.
We have our own dance tradition. So we have, as I mentioned, I think earlier, I used to be part of a Cornish dance group where we used to go around and display the traditional dances of Cornwall, and they can be divided into three groups. You have processional dances, feast day dances that would have been done on the Saint's Day of each town. You have set dances, which are more like the sort of formal things where we've got manuscripts that were by dance masters that have been discovered in big Cornish mansion houses, and that would have eventually filtered through to the common folk, because
Hmm.
the servants and so on would have seen the people doing it at the house and gone, oh yeah, we can do that as well. And then we've got scoot dances, which are step dances. So where the metal scoots, the bits that would protect your shoes when you're working
Hmm.
on in a mine or in fields or whatever. At the end of a hard day's work, you'd dance and you'd try to make sparks fly with your feet. So basically, it's a bit like tap dancing, but a specific form of tap dancing to
Hmm.
Cornwall, called
Okay.
scoot dancing. So there's all this sort of stuff. Then we have the actual feast days themselves. So we're just coming up to May, where we have, it's the best time of year in Cornwall. Not only have we got all the spring gardens who are absolutely bursting into bloom with all the amazing exotic plants that plant hunters have brought back to Cornwall over the years, but we've got Obios in Padstow. So Padstow is a village on the north coast of Cornwall, and it has a very ancient tradition on the 1st of May. I mean, it's a May Day thing, where there's a weird thing called an os, which is like a horse. It's a big black circle that goes on top of a person, and then it has a scary looking hat and face with a beard, and a person dances round ferociously around the town, surrounded by lots of other people who are all wearing white, and they play accordions and drums and sing a May song. And it's all about fertility and, welcoming in the summer, the warmer months, and chasing out the winter. And then just a week later than that, from my own hometown of Helston, we have Furry Day, which is slightly more sedate than Obios. Obios is really kind of like, yeah, fag in one hand, pint in the other, accordion balanced in the middle, and quite, yeah, earthy. Helston has become a bit more refined. We dance around behind the brass band of the town and welcome in the summer. The people dance through the houses and, chase out the winter spirits and things. There are older parts of the day, like the Hallan Tower, which is a kind of a pageant to a song, which is, the oldest part of the day. And it's, yeah, we know how to celebrate in Cornwall. And yeah, you have dances, traditional dances that would originally have been done in every village. Every village would have had its own processional feast day dance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which is wonderful. And most of them have been lost, but the Helston's still got its one, and it's done by the kids. It's done by the grown-ups at midday. It's done by the kind of what used to be the servants at 7 o'clock in the morning before they had to do their day's work. And so it's the younger, adults now. But yeah, we're good at celebrating. And always with a pasty.
Aside from the pasty, what do we eat? Or what do we like? What's a typical dish, let's say at like Christmas or New Year's, or what other Cornish foods do we enjoy?
Well, not that this is necessarily eaten by that many people, but it's a very traditional Cornish thing. There's a pie from a village called Mousel in West Cornwall called Starry Gazy Pie. And the story goes that in the nights leading up to Christmas, the storms were so very bad that none of the fishing boats were able to get out. So, maritime area, people have relied on fish a lot through the history. I'm vegan, so, not relevant to me, but it's a traditional thing. People couldn't get the boats out to get food, and so everyone was starving in this area. And one man, Tom Borcock, decided that he would go out and he would risk the storms and he would try and get some food for everybody. And he came back with 7 different types of fish. Wow. And a special type of pie was created called Starry Gazy Pie, where coming out of the crust there are the heads and the tails of the fish. I mean, it's quite revolting but beautiful at the same time, if you see what I mean.
So people still do this to this day with the fish heads on top of the pie.
Yes.
Wow.
So there is a day called Tom Borcock's Eve, and I think it's the day before Christmas Eve.
Okay.
And there's a big celebration in Mousel, which is spelt mouse hole, but it's pronounced Mousel. Yeah, people celebrate that still. I mean, I don't know how many people actually eat Starry Gazy Pie, because people don't like to actually think that meat came from an animal, and that's really obviously like dead fish. But yeah, this is a vegan telling you about Starry Gazy Pie. So I'm going to give you the kind of, yeah, I wouldn't touch it.
Do you know, and you're a vegan, so maybe you don't, but do you know of the 7 types of fish that we've got their heads propped up on this pie, is there a traditional, like, does it have to be the 7 traditional fish that everyone has, every year? Does it have to be 7 specific types of fish, or is it whatever you can get your hands on?
I think there probably are 7 specific types of fish. I mean, there are certain types of fish that are easily, are readily caught around the Cornish coast.
Okay.
So herring being one of them, mackerel being another one. I mean, just talking about traditions, another thing that's quite specific to Cornwall is there used to be people on the cliff tops called hewers when you were waiting to see a shoal of herring, and there'd be somebody standing on the cliff top watching for the shoals, and when they saw the shoals they would light some gorse bushes and branches of gorse bush, and wave them around and just direct the fishermen to where the shoal was.
Okay.
And they shouted a word in Cornish, heather, 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 which is the word for there's a shoal of herring over there.
Okay.
Yeah, herring definitely, and
Okay.
pilchards, and yeah,
Okay.
mackerel.
So we're not plopping an octopus on top of the pie or just
No,
like a
no, very much kind of traditional looking fish. Whilst we're on the theme of fish, sorry, I'm on a total
It's
aside now. You
okay.
got me going.
We love
Um,
side notes.
so there is a word that is in the English language which has come from the Cornish language, which is quite rare. I don't think there are that many of them, but there's a type of fish called wrasse. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes, I have.
And that comes from the Cornish word grach, and that means witch.
Oh,
So, I mean, I'm really pleased that you've heard of the name of a fish called wrasse. That's a Cornish word. It's come from grach, which means witch, which I think is quite harsh, because if you actually see a wrasse, oh, they're beautiful. They're beautifully coloured, really bright rainbow coloured fish, and they're called witches. Bless them.
I think
But
witches
they're
get
quite
a
famous.
bad I think witches get a bad rap because I think witches were probably beautiful women
Yes, yes.
who, who are the people who tell the history, Elizabeth? It's
Oh,
men.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
men.
know.
So
I
the
know.
men who were scorned by beautiful women became witches and now they're
Yeah,
ugly forever. But no,
yeah.
I don't believe
I agree. Okay. Thank you for that. You have just completely revolutionized how I'm going to tell people that tale in future, because I always go, oh, it's so sad that they're called witches. But I will now say, and that's why, because, witches are much maligned, beautiful, powerful, clever women.
Yes. Yes. Proud to be a witch. I've had so much fun chatting with you and learning
Good
from you
so.
in this episode. This is like, oh my gosh, we've had so much fun and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for all that you've shared, for all your work that you've done, for the legacy that you personally have touched for the Cornish language and the people of Cornwall. Thank you so much.
Oh, Miraz, thank you very much.
For our listeners who are interested in Cornish and maybe interested in your work, if you'd like to, please let us know where we can find your work and how we can keep in touch with you online.
Yep. So I'm on Instagram, and my tag is at Elizabeth.earn with an E .Ellis.
Great. I will add that link to the show notes for this episode so that people who want
Fantastic.
to connect with you can click and be connected right away.
Thank you.
I like to end each episode, I like to end each conversation with the same question, which is, do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Cornish to share and to teach us?
I do.
Okay.
So, yeah, rather than going for the really naff one, which is what's a cat's favorite color, purr, I won't do that one. No, I'm going to go for something much more sensible, which is a little saying that's very famous, that was collected from the Vicar of St. Justin Penrith, again, down in West Cornwall, around 1700. And the saying goes like this in Cornish: "An laver cos yw laver gwir, never does mas a davus re here, mes dain heb tavus re golus I dear." So that means the old saying is a true saying. Never did come good of a tongue too long, but a man without a tongue has lost his land. And it's that last line that gets you. It's like, if you lose your tongue, you've lost your land, you've lost your identity.
This
And
is
that sums it
very
up, doesn't it?
apropos to this conversation and this podcast. And that's a long one, but you see, my pencil is here.
Oh my goodness.
And I want to learn to say this. I want to learn
Okay.
to say this.
Should we do the end bit? Because the most important bit is Dain heb tavus regolus I dear. A man without a tongue has lost his land.
Okay, let's do that. Let me repeat after you syllable by syllable.
Uh-huh.
I will do my best to write it phonetically so I don't forget, and then we will put it all together.
Fantastic.
All right,
Okay.
I'm ready.
So, Dane,
Okay, one more time.
Dane.
Dane.
Yes.
Okay.
Heb,
Heb.
Tavis,
Tavis.
Ray,
Ray.
Golas,
Golas.
E,
E.
Deer.
Dear. Dane. Heb. Tavis. Ray. Golas. A. Dear.
Yay!
All right.
Zosta, you're a Cornish speaker. Brilliant.
Oh,
That's
that's fun. That's fun. No, I love to try. I love to try. And that's why I was laughing at first because I thought, okay, so in the first word, do we have that DH sound?
No, it's just a
Oh,
D.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dane. It's just a DEN.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I,
think.
yeah, I thought I heard that first and I was like, right out of the gate, we're going with this sound and I need more practice. But okay,
Oh,
so it's not the DH. Okay, it's just
no,
the,
there's
okay.
no DH in the whole of that quote, I'm afraid.
No, I love it. And I try to do this at the end of every episode because I hope that it will inspire people to try and try along with me because sometimes it's scary to try a new language and sometimes we feel embarrassed and we shouldn't be because that's how we learn. We try.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So thank you so much for teaching us that. I hope our listeners were practicing. I hope the Duke of Cornwall was practicing along with us while we were saying that. Um, but this has been so much fun, Elizabeth, and I've really enjoyed
Absolutely.
chatting with
And I
you.
love hearing you speak Cornish. That's such a really lovely way to finish the podcast.
Me too. I love it too. So you've inspired me. You've inspired me. Before I let you go, really quick question. Let's say you're in Cornwall and you have been talking to someone for quite some time, but now it's time for you to go your separate ways. What is the best way to say goodbye in Cornish?
Okay, so we could say Dugenes, which is literally goodbye, God be with you. Or if you want to have a DH and you're just talking to one person, so I'm talking to you now, Elle,
Mhm.
thou wellers, see you.
Thou
Thou wellers.
welles, thou
Hmm.
welles,
Yeah.
thou welles,
Yay!
Elizabeth.
I got a DH in.
Thou welles, Elizabeth.
Thou wellers, Elle.
Thank you so much, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye. New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like yourselves.